Welcome to Gen Z Creatives. We're excited to bring you our podcast, Striving to be the Best Yet. In today's episode, we dive into episode 2 of our discussion on Top G, the unfiltered journey of Andrew Tate. We hope you enjoy it. Let's get started.
Okay, let's get into this. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the formative years of Andrew Tate. Obviously, a figure who sparks a lot of debate.
That's putting it mildly. And we should be clear, we're working from a specific source here, right? A chapter focusing purely on his early life.
Exactly. It covers his birth, family, schooling, the environment he grew up in. Basically, the experiences that this particular source claims were foundational for his worldview.
Right. So our goal here is really just to unpack this perspective, see what influences and challenges this material highlights.
And just stick to what's in this chapter, to give you a clear picture of this specific take on his origins, not endorsing it, just exploring it.
Precisely. We want to understand how this source sees the roots of his philosophy.
So yeah, get ready. We're looking closely at the details provided here, exploring what this source calls the crucible, where his character was forged.
Okay, so where does this account kick things off?
It starts right at the beginning. His birth, December 1st, 1986, Walter Reed Army Medical Center, Washington, D.C.
Okay, and parents.
Yeah, the source introduces them right away and makes a point about the contrast. You've got his father, Emory Andrew Tate Jr., described as an international chess master, military background, framed as a symbol of Black excellence.
Quite a profile.
And then his mother, Eileen Tate, who was British. The source really flags this as a fusion of cultures from the get-go, suggests it shaped his early outlook.
Interesting. And they lived in the U.S. initially.
Briefly, yeah. The material mentions Chicago, Illinois, and also Goshen, Indiana, different places before what the source calls a major pivot.
Which was the move to England.
Exactly, the parents' divorce, and then moving to Luton, England, with his mother and his brother, Tristan.
Right, Luton. And the source has a particular take on Luton, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. It paints a pretty stark picture. Known for being tough, high levels of poverty, they lived in a council estate.
Which this source clarifies is, the lower rungs of the socioeconomic ladder.
Yeah, and it describes the streets basically becoming his playground. Survival wasn't just an idea, it was the unspoken rule.
And it uses that phrase, dominate or be dominated. Pretty intense atmosphere.
Very, and the source claims this is where he learned some core lessons early on.
Like what?
Well, watching his mother cope taught him about hard work over handouts. And the streets themselves, they taught toughness.
The need to never show weakness.
Yeah, the source says weakness there was akin to a death sentence. That's the framing.
Wow. Okay, so quite an upbringing described there. And what about the father's influence? Emory Tate Jr., even with the distance after the move.
The source presents it as huge, profoundly significant, even with absences.
How does it describe him?
As this larger-than-life figure. Chess master, international icon, a strategist in life.
Dominant mind, I think the phrase was.
That's it. Principled, a disciplinarian. The source really emphasizes that.
So teaching life lessons through strategy.
Yeah, like seeing life as strategic maneuvers, needing mental sharpness, thinking moves ahead, like chess, right?
Makes sense given his background.
And even when he wasn't physically there, the source says his presence was potent, laden with lessons.
Showing how to win, how to live with integrity.
Yeah.
But with the caveat, from his lens, the source notes.
Right, that's an important qualifier they include. And the stories from his travels, his chess tournaments, they're presented less as just stories and more as strategic blueprints.
Instilling this idea that the world was there for the taking.
Exactly. And this is where the source connects it to Andrew's own ambition. His father's success wasn't just an example, it was an unspoken challenge.
So mediocrity was out of the question.
Tantamount to defeat is how the source puts it. It claims this directly molded Andrew's ambition to, leap over that bar set by his father.
And this ties into his sense of self-worth, according to this material.
Directly. The source states he learned that one's worth is linked inexorably to their capacity to dominate, to prevail. That's strong stuff.
It really is. And his father's unconventional approach influenced his own.
Yeah, the source attributes Andrew's habit of questioning everything, charting his own course to his father's philosophy and contempt for trodden paths.
So ambition wasn't just about money or things.
Not according to this source. It was about embodying more, becoming someone who couldn't be overlooked or controlled by this societal machine.
And the psychological impact. Self-worth based on internal standards, not what others think.
That's the idea presented. Rigorous internal standards. The legacy, as this source frames it, is this relentless chase for excellence, learning to be the king in a landscape of pawns.
Wow. And the mother, Eileen, she gets a mention too.
She does, yeah. Framed as the bedrock, the nurturer. Juggling jobs, teaching sacrifice and survival back in that council estate environment. The steady presence.
Okay, so that's the family dynamic laid out by this source. What about school? Was that any different?
Not really, according to this account. It says school was never the place where Andrew Tate would bask in the glow of academic glory.
So not top of the class.
Far from it. The source describes it as just another battleground to assert himself.
And Luton School specifically.
Depicted as more akin to arenas where respect was not bestowed but fought for. Not exactly breeding grounds for academic stars in this telling. He apparently paid little attention to the curriculum.
So where was his focus then?
Towards physical prowess, according to this. His true education unfolded on the streets and within the confines of the gym.
Interesting. So school was more about social dynamics.
Mastering them, yeah. Learning how to command respect, but through, physical might and cunning, not grades.
And his relationship with authority.
Yeah.
Teachers, principals.
The source mentions a reputation for disruption. It claims this stemmed from an unwillingness to submit to authority that had not earned his respect. Basically, testing limits.
So the real learning, in this view, was outside the classroom.
Delving into human nature, understanding the pecking order, figuring out how to climb it. The source is very explicit. Lessons weren't about exams, but about surviving and thriving in life's relentless tests.
Finding value in self-education instead.
Exactly. And this source actually frames his academic struggles, his failures even, as a catalyst.
How so?
It says they ignited a fierce determination to disprove his detractors, spurred him towards self-education in things he thought mattered: business, psychology, reading people.
So, less about failing school, more about rejecting a system he felt didn't get him.
That's the interpretation this source offers, yeah. An act of defiance, forging self-reliance, learning what he needed on his own terms.
And this experience shaped his later philosophy.
The source argues it did, sculpted his approach. Lead, conquer, respect comes from strength, not just following rules. It sees this as a foundation, fashioning him into a survivor, a leader, a rule rewriter in their view.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. Luton itself, the broader environment, the source calls it a crucible.
Yeah, where the weak were either hammered into strength or shattered. Pretty dramatic framing. Says he absorbed brutal teachings there.
And the cultural landscape.
Sharp contrasts. Old industrial town facing hardship. Also mentions a significant Muslim population, especially on Marsh Farm.
Leading to cultural skirmishes.
That's the term used. Daily confrontations of different views, described almost like a Darwinian struggle. Plus, the early 2000s context.
Riots, unrest.
Yeah, the source mentions that, adding this layer of a simmering threat of violence. And it claims this whole climate taught him specific lessons.
About power, identity.
Exactly. Identity as armor or a weapon, how to leverage adversity. It taught him, according to this source, the ephemerality of peace and the potency of influence, the need to hold your ground.
And the source brings up something specific here, the lover boy technique.
It does. Describes it as a manipulative strategy he observed, something he'd later analyze and denounce. Notes it reflects the dark side of human trafficking he encountered, but stresses he never approved of such exploitation. That's a key point the source makes.
Right. So despite the conflict described, the diversity also taught him things.
Yeah, the source says it gave him an appreciation for different viewpoints, seeing life in nuanced shades of gray, and that true freedom comes from mastering control, knowing when to resist.
So growing up in that struggle, it made conformity seem pointless.
That's the argument. Conventional routes just weren't for him. Luton is framed as his initial school of real-world politics. Power and respect are seized, not given.
And this fostered certain traits.
According to the source, yes. A contempt for weakness, a compulsion for excellence, and deep self-reliance. The unrest, the defiance he saw, presented almost like training in ideological combat.
Compelling him to question everything.
Yeah.
Reject the mainstream.
That's what the source claims. It says this is where he began to perceive the Matrix, defining it here as a system designed to subdue people, enforce compliance.
And he absorbed lessons for domination, leadership.
Yeah, that's the language the source uses, yeah. It makes a bold claim. Luton didn't just shape him, it liberated him. Turned him into this unchained force, challenging the established order.
Okay, that's a powerful image. Now, another huge piece mentioned is sports, right? kickboxing.
Yeah, presented as absolutely central, more than just a sport. It was his retreat, his defiance, his path to greatness in Luton, according to the source.
A refuge, maybe?
Definitely, a place to channel things. But the source emphasizes it wasn't just about fighting, it was about mastering control, discipline, the art of war.
He started relatively late, didn't he? Late teens.
Yeah, but the source stresses his dedication and the profound impact it had. It argues kickboxing became his guiding philosophy, his way of life.
And he was successful, got titles.
He was. The source lists them. ISA English Full Contact Cruiserweight Champion, IKF British Cruiserweight Champion, and frames these titles specifically as affirmations of his supremacy, his ability to win.
So every fight, every training session
Was an ode to his discipline, a show of unyielding resolve. The ring, the source suggests, taught him that pain is fleeting, but glory endures.
and the mental side.
Yeah.
The resilience needed.
Profoundly influenced his outlook, the source claims. The gym taught him life isn't about dodging punches, but how you endure them, how you bounce back, and how you retaliate with even greater force.
So the discipline wasn't just physical, it extended to life.
That's the core argument here. Sweat, bruises, wins, they all translated into lessons about endurance, strategy, governing your body and your mind.
The rigor becoming the bedrock of his character.
Exactly. Successes wrestled through unyielding effort, and the competitive aspect, it instilled a champion's mindset. No settling for mediocrity.
Reign or face subjugation, I think was a phrase used.
Something like that, yeah. And resilience wasn't just bouncing back, but surging ahead. Setbacks were lessons. Take the hit, evolve, find the opponent's weakness.
And this mentality applied to everything. Obstacles as opponents.
That's how the source presents it. And it wasn't just brute force, it was cerebral too. Strategy, patience, timing.
So physical excellence demonstrated self-mastery.
Yeah, the idea that you are the sole architect of your triumphs or the cause of your downfalls. The source claims this realization drove him to seize control, reject fate or norms, and carve his own path using those gym principles.
Discipline, focus, resilience, the drive to win.
Right. These weren't just for sports, they were a blueprint for life. For becoming, as the source puts it, a man of action, authority, influence. It argues sports forged Andrew Tate, the individual who sets his own terms.
Okay, so let's try and pull these threads together. The source synthesizes these challenges. His youth as a battlefield.
Yeah. Luton after the divorce, money struggles, council estate life, survival mode.
And the core lesson from that, according to this material.
No handouts. Seize what you want or settle for less. Inaction equals oblivion. That's the stark message presented.
Social dynamics taught him. Standing is currency. Respect is earned, sought for.
Through might, intelligence, aggression, whatever worked. Stand your ground, hit back, make your mark. Master the chaos, turn enemies, or remove them. That's the picture painted.
This is where he grasped power, the source claims. The idea that only the strong prevail.
And personal challenges, like seeing that lover boy technique, are framed as both ethical and tactical lessons about manipulation.
And run-ins with authority. School, maybe elsewhere.
Seen as shackles, according to this. Each encounter framed as a lesson in rebellion and challenging norms, forging his own way.
The source says these trials hammered him into the man he is today. Economic hardship fueled the drive for wealth.
But wealth as autonomy, as command, not just luxury, and self-reliance as absolutely essential. The source quotes a belief. Waiting for rescue leads only to endless waiting.
Which becomes a cornerstone of his later message. Seize control, be your own liberator.
That's the connection the source makes. And the competitive environment, pure dynamics, they taught resilience, refusal to back down. Every challenge was a chance to prove himself.
So rebellion becomes his signature. Against norms, against the established order.
Yeah, spurning conventional paths, seeing them as traps designed to suppress or control, defining life purely on his own terms.
Mastering the art of war, beyond the physical. Manipulation, power dynamics, psychology.
Using them as weapons, yeah. Redefine the rules, not just playing by them.
And overcoming all this adversity.
Yeah.
That's the bedrock of his philosophy in this view.
Absolutely. Adversity is a lesson. Setbacks are foundations. True freedom comes from within, self-mastery, independence. That's the essence of the rebellion and self-reliance the source claims he embodies and teaches.
Okay, one last major area. The genesis of his ambition. How does the source describe that?
Not as something that just appeared, but an innate force shaped by his youth. The streets of Luton demanded entrepreneurial spirit just to get by.
So early ventures weren't about getting rich.
More about scraping by, yeah. turning tough times into opportunities. The source actually cites selling candy at school.
As his first lesson in capitalism.
Supply and demand, capitalism in its most primal state is how it's put, a basic early lesson.
And as he got older, the ambition grew.
Refused petty jobs, aimed higher. Kickboxing itself became an enterprise, according to this. Not just the sport, but crafting a marketable persona.
The battle for public perception.
Yeah.
Building the brand.
Exactly. Every fight, every media appearance framed as a chance to build the Andrew Tate brand, his entry into public life.
And the goal wasn't just money.
Control, according to this source. Establishing his own realm, setting his own rules. Then came online ventures.
The internet is the new battlefield.
Yeah, for modern hustlers. Using his image, his narrative, to sell digital products, use social media, strategic combat, essentially.
And these ambitions reflected a core belief, that your origins don't define your endpoint.
Precisely. Origins aren't shackles, they're launch pads. Scarcity taught him the value of every penny, every opportunity.
So seeing opportunities where others saw roadblocks.
That's the perspective shift described. Every venture, every bit of public exposure was an education in resilience. Taught him, the source says, that to get to the top, you first have to master starting with nothing.
So ambition, in this philosophy, is about the drive, not the starting line.
Yeah. Early ventures confirmed this principle, demonstrated his ability to rise above his circumstances, turn adversity into fuel.
A key lesson being self-reliance, making your own opportunities.
That's highlighted. Success is seized by seeing potential everywhere.
And his background became leverage, not a limitation.
That's the conclusion the source draws. These early lessons shaped his whole approach, his businesses, his worldview, the foundation for the empire and persona, turning hardship into a story of conquest.
And that, the source implies, is how you become legendary, wielding the past as wings, not burdens.
That's the narrative arc presented in this material, yes.
Okay, so let's quickly recap the main points from this specific source. We've seen how it connects his birth circumstances, his parents' influence, the tough Luton environment, school challenges, kickboxing discipline, and various hurdles.
All described as contributing to the foundation of his worldview, his philosophy, his ambition, as seen through the lens of this particular chapter.
And the key lessons this source emphasizes are things like hard work, resilience, strategy, self-reliance, questioning authority.
Seeing opportunity in adversity and this constant pursuit of dominance and self-mastery, those are the core takeaways highlighted here.
Right. So understanding these formative experiences, as described in this source, might offer some context for the perspectives he shares today, especially on themes like masculinity, wealth, challenging norms.
And it leaves us with a final thought, kind of stemming from the source's framing. If, as this material suggests, adversity is a crucible, what are the key challenges you, listening, have faced that have most significantly shaped your own core beliefs and ambitions? Something to think about.
That's all for today. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Tune in for the next one, Gen Z Creatives. There's so much more to uncover. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.